Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is into H.R. 1, sometimes called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Right.
This is the 2025 Republican-led bill. It passed the House. Now it's being debated in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And the big goals seem to be making those 2017 tax cuts permanent and, well, significantly reforming federal welfare programs.
Yeah.
Our job here is to really understand the potential impact, and we're looking at nonpartisan sources, the CBO, Joint Committee on Taxation.
And what's really striking, I think, is how the core philosophy here is, well, it's almost the opposite of some previous approaches.
How so?
It aims to fund these huge multi-trillion-dollar tax extensions, mainly by proposing pretty sweeping cuts to federal entitlement programs. It's a major strategic shift.
Okay, so financing tax cuts via entitlement cuts. Proponents, though, they talk about an economic boom from making the 2017 tax breaks permanent.
Right, that's the argument. It's essentially supply-side economics, lower taxes spur investment, leading to growth that ideally offsets the revenue loss.
But the CBO, the nonpartisan scorekeeper, sees it differently.
They do. Their projection estimates an increase in federal deficits, about $144 billion over the next decade, 2025 to 2034.
Okay.
And actually, their more comprehensive dynamic score, that's the one trying to factor in economic feedback, found it would likely increase the 10-year cost by an extra $356 billion.
Oh, wait. Increase it. Why?
Largely because the model predicts that the big increase in federal borrowing needed would push up interest rates.
Ah, okay. Debt servicing costs.
Exactly. Adds about $441 billion in new debt service costs, which kind of swamps any small revenue gains from growth. So the projection suggests no major long-term boom and potentially, a larger national debt for you.
That's a very different picture. Now, moving to the other side of the ledger, the bill proposes some really big changes for Medicaid and SNP. How would those hit people?
Okay, for Medicaid, the big headline is a mandatory federal work requirement, first time ever.
For everyone.
For able-bodied adults, 19 to 64, they'd need to document 80 hours a month of work or education or community service. The Senate version even extends that to parents if their kids are over 14.
Okay, 80 hours. But you mentioned something striking earlier about why people might lose coverage.
Right. The analysis suggests the main driver of coverage loss isn't necessarily people refusing to work, but the sheer complexity of the administration.
Like proving you met the requirement.
Exactly. Proving compliance before you get coverage, navigating eligibility checks maybe twice a year. It's a lot of hurdles. The CBO thinks these changes could lead to somewhere between 10.9 and 11.8 million people losing insurance by 2034.
11 million. Wow. And that accounts for about $1 trillion in federal savings on Medicaid.
Roughly, yes. That's where the projected savings come from.
So it's less about the work itself, more about the system being hard to navigate. What about SNAP, the Food Assistance Program?
SNAP sees maybe even more fundamental changes. The bill would end its 50-year history of 100% federal funding.
Really?
It mandates states pay a match, anywhere from 5% to 25%, based on their error rates. That's a huge cost shift, estimated around $128 billion, directly onto state budgets.
Administrative costs.
Federal reimbursement for those gets cut in half, plus the work requirements get tougher there, too.
How so?
The upper age limit for requirements jumps from 54 to 64. It applies to parents whose youngest kid is 14 or older. And importantly, it eliminates exemptions for groups like veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and youth aging out of foster care.
That's quite a broadening. What's the projected impact?
Analysts estimate it could lead to a 30% to 36% cut in the program overall, about $300 billion less in food aid through 2034, maybe 2 million people cut off entirely.
The states might just opt out.
It's a possibility. If the cost becomes too high, they might have to cut other services or even leave the program. A tough choice.
So you've got these significant cuts to programs for lower-income folks, costs shifted to states. Where does that money effectively end up? Who benefits from this shuffle?
Well, the nonpartisan analyses point towards it functioning as a profoundly regressive fiscal transfer. Meaning resources tend to shift from lower-income households towards wealthier individuals and corporations. The numbers suggest the poorest 20% could lose, on average, maybe $1,600 a year.
And the top earners?
They could see an average tax cut around $12,000. The Joint Committee on Taxation had an even starker projection.
I saw that number, the 468%. What does that mean exactly? It's not a literal tax rate hike, is it?
No, not a direct tax hike on their income. It's a way of measuring the impact of losing cash equivalent benefits like SNP or Medicaid value. For the bottom 20%, the loss of those benefits by 2031 could have a financial impact equivalent to a massive tax increase because they get very little offsetting tax relief. It's a way to quantify the net effect.
Okay, that makes sense. It's the net loss framed as a percentage. Let's make it concrete. We looked at Maria, single mom, Texas, 2 kids, earns about $18,720 a year.
Right. For her family, the new SNAP work rules for parents of older kids could apply, creating that administrative burden we talked about. But maybe more significantly, that new state match for SNAP. Texas might be forced to cut benefit amounts. If her family's food aid gets cut, say, 50%, that loss would likely dwarf any small tax credit gain she might get.
So a net loss for her.
Probably. Around $1,900 a year, potentially. And you scale that up.
Yeah.
Think about the strain on community support systems, healthcare providers in rural areas, food banks that are already stretched thin. It has ripple effects.
So wrapping this up,
Yeah.
what's the big picture takeaway for you, the listener? This bill, H.R. 1, it seems like more than just a budget document.
Absolutely.
It feels like a blueprint for potentially reordering America's social contract, shifting responsibility away from the federal safety net.
It definitely challenges that idea of a countercyclical safety net programs expanding automatically when times get tough.
Right, replacing it with a system where basic help depends on meeting complex rules and where states carry a much heavier financial load.
Which leaves us with a big question, really, for you to think about. How might this kind of fundamental shift in our social safety net change the health, the stability, and maybe the fairness of our country down the road?